Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. I am your host, Tyler Smith. It's good to see you all again. Thank you to all of those who have been a part of this channel thus far and have subscribed and liked my videos and watched the content. Thank you very much for being a part of this channel. This channel is ultimately for you. This channel is for you to maybe you already knew some of this stuff, but maybe my videos help condense the knowledge or bring it together in an easier to learn format so that you can share my videos with others as well. It's all about sharing the knowledge. Okay, so today's video is going to be about Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus. They are essentially one being, but these are different incarnations. And we're going to get into that a little bit. So the first book that I wanted to jump into is The Secret Teachings of All Ages. What this book has to say about Hermes and Thoth. There's a picture of Hermes Trismegistus right there. He's kind of like the original prototype for a wizard. You know, any of those characters, like Gandalf, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, they all kind of come from the archetype of Hermes. I knew I had a picture somewhere as well. An illustration. There it is. Hermes standing upon the back of Typhon. Hermes, as the personification of universal wisdom, is here depicted with his foot upon the back of Typhon, the vanquished dragon of ignorance and perversion. And of course we know about Typhon, that energy in the LVX. It's associated with Apophis, the destroyer. So it's the vanquished dragon of ignorance and perversion. Hermes is standing on top of him. He's conquered him. To the Egyptian initiates, Typhon, the devourer of souls, signified the lower world. So this could be equated with the Clepothic realm as well, which swallows up the spiritual nature of the individual who, being imperfect, is forced to descend from the higher spheres and be reborn into the physical universe. So the whole Kabbalistic idea of souls moving down the tree of life and being incarnated into Malkut. To be swallowed by Typhon, therefore, signifies the process of rebirth, from which man can only release himself by vanquishing his mortal adversary. It's breaking the chain of the circle. We've talked about that many times before, the serpent eating its own tail. You have to break beyond. In one hand, Hermes carries the caduceus, a winged rod with two fighting serpents entwined about it. In the other, the immortal emerald, upon whose surface was inscribed in raised letters the sum of philosophy. The figure wears the ancient Egyptian Masonic apron, according to the pattern discovered by Belzoni, the eminent Egyptologist. The two small circles contain the forms and symbols most closely associated with Hermes. In the upper circle is the ibis. These are all symbols that are on this picture that I showed you. You should be able to look it up on Google Images pretty easily if you wanted to follow along. In the upper circle is the ibis, whose curious characteristics have caused it to be particularly associated with the medical art. In the initiation ceremonies, the Egyptian priests wore masks in the form of the ibis head to signify that they represented the attributes of Thoth, or Hermes. The lower circle contains the dog, an animal always associated with Hermes because of its intelligence and devotion. Upon the forehead of Hermes appears the Urarius, interesting, the secret symbol of the constellation of Scorpio, which represents the regeneration of the same power that, in the form of the dragon, lies helpless under his foot. It's actually more of like a king cobra coming out from the forehead. So when the Egyptians, they wear that, that's about the pineal gland. It's about regeneration, the constellation of Scorpio. Regeneration of the same power that in the form of a dragon lies helpless under his foot. So that's the different phases of Scorpio. This would represent the cobra coming out of the third eye. The pineal gland would be the phoenix form of the Scorpio. The dragon being crushed under his foot would be the serpent version, or more along the lines of the Scorpio, because the Scorpio comes in 3 stages: scorpion, serpent, and then the phoenix, which rises above. So you have different archetypes, you got Typhon, all these different principalities, representing dark attributes, which are necessary because the Scorpio energy is very necessary at the end of the day. I myself have 4 major planets in Scorpio. The scarab over the heart of Hermes represents the presence of the spiritual and regenerative light within his own soul. The collar typifies by its circles the orbits of the heavenly bodies. The 3 points of the tail of Typhon diagram the 3 points of the tail of Typhon, which end in arrows, indicate the 3 destructive expressions of universal energy. This should sound familiar, especially if you're a master mason, Calls to mind the 3 ruffians. The 3 destructive expressions of universal energy here are mental, moral, and physical perversion. The entire diagram signifies mastery through the regeneration of the body, the illumination of the mind, and the transmutation of the emotions. So it's all about taking these trials and these things that we learn and transmuting it and conquering the dragon. There, you can pause that and look at that. I know the quality's not really going to be that high there, but... So let me go ahead and jump into the notes that I have for Hermes. So Hermes and Thoth are synonymous. He's this very Christ-like figure that appears over history, being incarnated at different time periods in different bodies. Okay, mystical passage at the beginning of chapter in the Secret Teachings about how he conquers Typhon. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is allegorical or mythical to teach you in a symbolic way what's going on, because sometimes words themselves are just not even valid enough. I'll go ahead and read the introduction of this. This is where Hermes, I believe, he comes face to face with the dragon or the universal mind. So let's read this real quick. This is the beginning of the life and writings of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. It's chapter 6 in the Secret Teachings of All Ages, if you wanted to follow along. Thunder rolled, lightning flashed. The veil of the temple was rent from top to bottom. The venerable initiator in his robes of blue and gold. And I see that combination of colors very often, it seems like, in ancient initiatory dramas. The venerable initiator in his robes of blue and gold slowly raised his jeweled wand and pointed with it into the darkness revealed by the tearing of the silken curtain. Behold the light of Egypt. The candidate in his plain white robe gazed into the utter blackness framed by the 2 great lotus-headed columns beneath which the veil had hung. As he watched, a luminous haze distributed itself through the atmosphere until the air was a mass of shining particles. The face of the neophyte was illumined by the soft glow as he scanned the shimmering cloud for some tangible object. The initiator spoke again. This light which ye behold is the secret luminance of the mysteries. Whence it comes none knoweth, save the master of the light. Behold him! Suddenly through the gleaming mist a figure appeared, surrounded by a flickering greenish sheen. The initiator lowered his wand and, bowing his head, placed one hand edgewise against his breast in humble salutation. The neophyte stepped back in awe, partly blinded by the glory of the revealed figure. Gaining courage, the youth gazed at the divine one. The form before him was considerably larger than that of a mortal man. The body seemed partly transparent so that the heart and brain could be seen pulsating, and radiant. As the candidate watched, the heart changed into an ibis. So this is Thoth they're talking about right here. It's not Thoth confronting the dragon. That's later on in the Secret Teachings of All Ages chapter. The heart changed into an ibis, and the brain into a flashing emerald. That's when they're talking about the divine Pymander in that part, I'm pretty sure. In its hand, this mysterious being bore a winged rod entwined with serpents. The aged initiator, raising his wand, cried out in a loud voice, "All hail thee, Thoth Hermes, thrice greatest. All hail thee, prince of men. All hail thee, who standeth upon the head of Typhon." At the same instant, a lurid, writhing dragon appeared, a hideous monster. There it is. Part serpent, part crocodile, and part hog. Interesting. From its mouth and nostrils poured sheets of flame, and horrible sounds echoed through the vaulted chambers. Suddenly, Hermes struck the advancing reptile with the serpent-wound staff, the caduceus, and with snarling cry the dragon fell over upon its side, while the flames about it slowly died away. Hermes placed his foot upon the skull of the vanquished Typhon, as we just saw in the picture. The next instant, with a blaze of unbearable glory that sent the neophyte staggering backward against a pillar, the immortal Hermes, followed by steamers of greenish mist, passed through the chamber and faded into nothingness. So that kind of gives you that mystical, overall vibe that's going on. He's the keeper of the book of life, it says somewhere in here. Someone said that Hermes was the author of 20,000 books. Another guy increased this to more than 36,000. Very interesting. Hermes revealed to mankind medicine, chemistry, law, the arts and sciences, astrology, music, rhetoric, magic, philosophy, geography, mathematics, especially geometry. So you have that Masonic influence going on there. And Hermes is very Masonic, all of the Emerald Tablet stuff. I probably won't have time to get into that in this video, but I would like to read from my book that I'm writing, Freemasonry and Ceremonial Magic. I do talk about the Hermetic principles from more of a magical standpoint rather than your typical spiritual book. So it gives a little bit more insight. Maybe in a future video, I can get into that a little bit and read some of that. That would be cool. I don't think I'm gonna have time this video though. We're gonna focus on just Thoth and Hermes. So he was the keeper of the books of life. I'm trying to see where it says that here in the book. I just wrote notes, and a lot of this I didn't write where they were in the book. This is kind of similar to the whole idea of being a keeper of the book of life, though. When we think of Archangel Raziel, he has the giant book in his hand, and keeps record of all the actions and what's going on the earth, along with the Akashic record. The Akashic record too. It's very similar idea. Hermes is the first intelligencer or embodiment of universal mind. They talk about, same with Jesus a lot of the times, but about Hermes really being a real person. And Manly P. Hall says he probably was a real sage. Historical accounts, of course, always get blended with myth, though, to some degree. Regardless, he is analogous with the cosmic principle of thoughts. So that's really important. That's the first Hermetic principle, the principle of mentalism. Author of 20,000 books. Someone else said more than 36,000. Yeah, here it is. In the picture that I showed you, the original black and white picture of Hermes here. Master of all arts and sciences, perfect in all crafts, ruler of the three worlds, scribe of the gods, and keeper of the books of life. Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the 3 times greatest, the first intelligencer, was regarded by the ancient Egyptians as the embodiment of the universal mind, while in all probability there actually existed a great sage and educator by the name of Hermes. But it is impossible to extricate the original man from the mass of legendary accounts which attempt to identify him with the cosmic principle of thought. So he's been blended into this myth about being the thought principle of the universe. As I said before, Hermes revealed medicine, chemistry, law, art, astrology, music, rhetoric, magic, philosophy, geography, mathematics, especially geometry. This is very Masonic. Also an anatomy and oratory. I remember I looked up what oratory meant, but I can't remember what the definition of that word was now. Hermes is essentially the godlike man. He has communicated the sum of the abyss. I put question mark because I thought that was interesting. It's at the bottom of page 93. In his Biographia Antica, Francis Barrett says of Hermes, if God ever appeared in man, he appeared in him. Very Jesus-like, of course, as is evident both from his books and his Pymander, in which works he has communicated the sum of the abyss. So all the knowledge of the abyss, and the divine knowledge to all posterity, by which he has demonstrated himself to have been not only an inspired divine, but also a deep philosopher, obtaining his wisdom from God and heavenly things and not from man. His wisdom came from heavenly things, divinely inspired, extraterrestrial. We'll get into that. I don't know if this is going to take me 2 videos. It might. Let's just see how far we get. So there's that whole extraterrestrial aspect going on here. You kind of get the idea of that. Whether space is actually out there somewhere or whether we just vibrationally move through these spheres or realms of existence is up to debate. I can't really tell you how the whole process works. I've heard so many different versions and so many different theories from different people that it's really hard to know for sure. Hermes was possibly Enoch. That makes sense. The second messenger of God, quote. That's what I put there, quote, the second messenger of God. Hermes was Greek mythology, later becoming Mercury of the Latins. He is Mercury because it is the closest body to the sun. And Hermes or Thoth is basically equated with the archetype of Mercury, and we'll get into that in a minute. But even though they say that Thoth was a king, an Atlantean king, his archetype more is kind of the driving force behind kingship, though. Thoth, or Hermes, is always kind of that wise counsel that is in the background, you know. He has counsel with the king, you know, beforehand, before he goes to his big meetings and makes his big plans or whatever. It's kind of the idea, you know, in Star Wars you have the main character, Luke, but then you have Obi-Wan Kenobi who's guiding him. You have Yoda who's guiding him. It's kind of the same idea. Thoth kind of works with the kingship in that manner. I've always found that to be the case. Of course, if we're going to jump to the Tree of Life, we're working with the sphere of Hod when we deal with Mercury. The archangel for this sphere, the Tree of Life archangel, Michael. We've explained the differences in videos before. He wears orange robes and he carries a caduceus wand. And Thoth is very much associated with this sphere because it's Mercury. And Hermes Trismegistus, that archetype, that energy. This realm, the Hod realm, is very much the old god realm. It's like the arcanum. It's all the knowledge of... Mercury is all about knowledge. Now, Thoth is also equated with moon energy quite a bit, too. You see the crescent moon in a lot of the ibis symbology and the bird-like symbology. He's kind of a in-depth character. There's a lot going on with Thoth and Hermes. There's a lot to explain and get into. I've had at least one beautiful meditation experience that I remembered before, where I was able to see Thoth in his ibis form. And I just remember being either next to or surrounded by this waterfall. And I was perfectly just, I wasn't really where I was physically. I was there with Thoth. He didn't really speak, but I could still feel what it was that he was communicating to me, and it was pretty cool. It was a very serene experience. I haven't really had an experience like that very recently. That was kind of weird. The tones on the TV kind of stopped there for a second. So maybe Thoth is with us right now. That would be cool. Hermes is the creature nearest to God. So this, I was about to say, that reminds me of Metatron and the messenger of the gods. Metatron and Raziel correspondence. So they all kind of have these similar, all those characters have these same characteristics. Thoth actually weighed the souls of the dead in the judgment hall of Osiris, the hall of Amenti. And we'll talk about the halls of Amenti here in a bit. Hermes is the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals, borrowed from mysteries established by Hermes. So that's super interesting. The modern Masonic rituals are way different. I think Freemasonry has been a different thing for the past 300 years. What we now know as modern Freemasonry with its rituals and stuff started about 300 years ago, 1717, Gruce and Grudoin in London, England. But of course, we know that all those teachings come from the older teachings. So Thoth was the original Mason, because he was around a long time before Jesus was. The history, the timelines is just so far prior to all of that stuff. So you have to really, if you want to know about Freemasonry to a deeper level, you have to go back and study these characters like Thoth. It's necessary. Pythagoras, Thoth, all these guys. It's super important stuff to get into and to understand. And then you can tap into that archetype, that intelligence when you need to. So he's the author of, Hermes is the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals borrowed from mysteries established by Hermes. All the Masonic symbols are essentially hermetic. Hermes changed the calendar from 360 to 365 days. He's called the thrice greatest because he's the greatest of all philosophers, kings, and priests. And that should kind of ring a bell for you, some of you. Kings, priests. If you know, you know. Perhaps refer to picture diagram of Hermes. I already did that. I already showed you guys that. Thoth or Tahuti. He's actually called Tahuti in like the Thelemic rituals. Because when you do I did a video a long time ago, it's been a minute now, on the solar adorations, the Egyptian solar adorations. I'm trying to think. Hail unto thee who art raw in thy rising. Hail unto thee who art raw in thy strength, who travellest over the heavens in thy bark at the uprising of the sun. Tahuti standeth in his splendor at the prow, and Rahor abideth at the helm. So the prow is kind of like the front of the boat. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember my boat terminology very well. I had to take a test a long time ago to get my license to drive a boat. I had that since I was probably about 13 years old. Got all these weird random memories popping back. Need to stay on track. But yeah, the solar adoration, he's referred to as Tahuti in the solar adorations. And Thoth or Tahuti, as I said before, he's also associated with the moon, was a moon god, ibis head, and the crescent moon disk. In ceremonial magic, he's usually equated with Mercury and Hod, as I've stated before. If something's hermetically sealed, it designates the closing of a glass vessel by fusion after the manner of chemical manipulators. Emerald Table, and Divine Pymander are the two most famous works of Hermes. Early Christians did not dislike Hermes, but here on page 95, I remember this part being really dumb. It made the church fathers sound pretty stupid. Hermes, he was one of the few philosopher priests of pagandom, so he was one of the few pagan guys, whom the early Christians did not vent their spleen. Some church fathers went so far as to declare that Hermes exhibited many symptoms of intelligence, and that if he had only been born in a more enlightened age, he might have benefited by their instruction. He would have been a really good man. I thought that was stupid. Of course, a lot of the church guys are usually pretty dumb. They don't know the deeper mysteries. They don't understand. They're too scared to comprehend. To know thyself is something quite interesting. The deeper you go, the more you know. At the end of page 95 up to page 96, Egyptian ceremony and levels of degrees explained here are very interesting. You have these different levels. You have a singer, an astrologer, a scribe, a stole keeper, and then the prophets. And that's kind of reminiscent of Halo, if you've ever played Halo. And the prophets read these books called the hieratic. They're the highest levels in this Egyptian degree system. Books mainly on philosophy and then some on medicine, so they read these books. Okay, let's check this out. For the Egyptians pursue a philosophy of their own. Hold on, let me read In his Stramata, Clement of Alexandria, one of the few chroniclers of pagan lore whose writings have been preserved to this age, gives practically all the information that is known concerning the original 42 books of Hermes and the importance with which these books were regarded by both the temporal and spiritual powers of Egypt. Clement describes one of their ceremonial processions as follows. Here we go. For the Egyptians pursue a philosophy of their own. This is principally shown by their sacred ceremonial. For first advances the singer, bearing some one of the symbols of music. For they say that he must learn 2 of the books of Hermes, the one which contains the hymns of the gods, the second regulations for the king's life. And after the singer advances, the astrologer, with a horloge in his hand, I'm not sure what that is, and a palm, the symbols of astrology. He must have the astrological books of Hermes, which are 4 in number, always in his mouth. That's weird. Of these, one is about the order of the fixed stars that are visible, and another about the conjunctions and luminous appearances of the sun and moon. I wonder if they had to memorize that, if that's what this means, and the rest respecting their risings. Next in order advances the sacred scribe, with wings on his head and in his hand a book and rule, in which were writing ink and the reed with which they write. And he must be acquainted with what are called hieroglyphics, and known about cosmogony and geography, the position of the sun and moon, and about the 5 planets, also the description of Egypt and the chart of the Nile, and the description of the equipment of the priests and of the place consecrated to them, and about the measures and things used in the sacred rites. So kind of getting into some Masonic sounding stuff right there. Then the stole keeper follows those previously mentioned with the cubit of justice and the cup for libations. He is acquainted with all points called pudadic, relating to training, and mosophaltic, sacrificial. There are also 10 books which relate to the honor paid by them to their gods and containing the Egyptian worship, as that relating to sacrifices, first fruits, hymns, prayers, processions, festivals, and the like. And behind all walks the prophet. This is the guy we were talking about, the head, with the water vase carried openly in his arms, who is followed by those who carry the issue of loaves. He, as being the governor of the temple, learns the 10 books called the hieratic, and they contain all about the laws and the gods and the whole of the training of the priests. For the prophet is among the Egyptians also over the distribution of the revenues. I think that pretty much covers everything you just say there. These books of Hermes, though, were lost in the burning of the Library of Alexandria, of course. Romans and later Christians destroyed them to control the Egyptians because they're lame. Some volumes are now buried in the desert, though still. So I need to read the whole bottom of page. It says the volumes, the books I was just talking about, the volumes which escaped the fire were buried in the desert, and their location is now known to only a few initiates of the secret schools. And Manly P. Hall released this book a while back. This would have been... Wow, original text published in 1928. It's been a minute. It's been a minute. So I wrote here to read the whole bottom of page 96. While Hermes still walked the earth with men, he entrusted to his chosen successors the sacred book of Thoth. This work contained the secret processes by which the regeneration of humanity was to be accomplished, and also served as the key to his other writings. Nothing definite is known concerning the contents of the book of Thoth, other than its pages were covered with strange hieroglyphic figures and symbols, which gave to those acquainted with their use unlimited power over the spirits of the air and these subterranean divinities. When certain areas of the brain are stimulated by the secret processes of the mysteries, the consciousness of man is extended, and he is permitted to behold the immortals and enter into the presence of the superior gods. Anyone who's on this path of knowledge and understanding and doing ceremonial work will understand where he's coming from. You're tapping into something that gives you more life. More life force. You're tapped in. Your energies are balanced. You're able to overcoming. And you always do every time. Even when you think it's not going to work out. Guess what? It works out. The Book of Thoth describes the method whereby the stimulation was accomplished. When certain areas of the brain are stimulated by the secret processes of the mysteries, the consciousness of man is extended, and he is permitted to behold the immortals. The stimulation was accomplished in truth, therefore it was the key to immortality. According to legend, the Book of Thoth was kept in a golden box in the inner sanctuary of the temple. This should sound pretty familiar, I would think. There was but one key, and this was in the possession of the Master of the Mysteries, the highest initiate of the Hermetic Arcanum. He alone knew what was written in the secret book. The Book of Thoth was lost to the ancient world with the decay of the mysteries, but its faithful initiates carried it sealed in the sacred casket into another land. The book is still in existence and continues to lead the disciples of this age into the presence of the immortals. No other information can be given to the world concerning it now, but the apostolic succession from the first Hierophant, initiated by Hermes himself, remains unbroken to this day. Sounds like the lineage of Christ. It's very similar to that whole idea. And those who are peculiarly fitted, that's such a hard word to say, and those who are peculiarly fitted to serve the immortals may discover this priceless document if they will search sincerely and tirelessly for it. Yeah, as I was saying before, this is part of our story, this tapping into this power. It's been a part of my story and self-discovery, and I think everyone that's probably a part of this channel has had that similar level of self-discovery. So I still have quite a bit of notes to get through. So this is probably going to end up being a 2-part video, this Hermes Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus Thoth video. So this will be part 1. I don't really want to rush through anything, so hopefully these end up being some of the more thorough videos out there, because we're bringing a whole bunch of information together, kind of discussing it, opening up our minds a little bit. Book of Thoth on page 97 sounds very similar to the Ark of the Covenant, as I was just saying. Very interesting info here about this lineage of Thoth guarding its secrets. We read that part. Sounds very much like the Ark being carried into another land, etc. Yep, it's very much like the Christian story of the Ark of the Covenant. So really that story is about the Book of Thoth. It's like a copy story, almost. It says, now the Book of Thoth is the mysterious tarot of the Bohemians, a strange emblematic book of 78 leaves which has been in possession of the gypsies since the time when they were driven from their ancient temple, the Serapeum. I think there was some kind of god or something that was Serapis? Is that... Maybe I'm misremembering. There are now in the world several secret schools privileged to initiate candidates into the mysteries, but in nearly every instance they lighted their altar fires from the flaming torch of Hermes. Hermes in his Book of Thoth revealed to all mankind the one way, and for ages the wise of every nation and every faith have reached immortality by the way established by Hermes in the midst of the darkness for the redemption of humankind. Another very Jesus-sounding line there. The Divine Pymander by Hermes Trismegistus is one of the earliest of the Hermetic writings, probably not in its original form. It's been remodeled, so it was rewritten it was incorrectly translated by the Christians, but it undoubtedly contains many of the original concepts of the Hermetic cultus. The Divine Pymander has 17 fragmentary writings. The second book of the Divine Pymander, called Poimanderus, or the Vision, is believed to describe the method by which the divine wisdom was first revealed to Hermes. This is the whole story with Hermes and the dragon. It was after Hermes had received this revelation that he began his ministry, teaching to all those who would listen to the secrets of the invisible universe as they had been unfolded to him. And I think that's pretty much what the rest of this chapter in the Secret Teachings is. It's the accounting of the story. So yeah, we're already at 38 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video. So next time I will either finish up this video, the Emerald Tablet Hermes Thoth video series, because I think it's only going to take me 2 videos, or I've already started notes on Archangel Raphael. It makes sense since we do the LBRP all the time, and I've done other angel videos. I've gone into depth now on Zadkiel, what I do, Hanael and Kimiel, and I've covered Raziel too. So it makes sense to cover the lore and some of the more in-depth descriptions of the 4 elemental archangels. So I'm going to cover Raphael first. Some people say Raphael. I say Raphael. It's more what resonates with you. But it makes sense to cover him because when we do the LBRP, when we close our eyes and see the archangels, appearing before us, the more we understand about that archetype. Remember, the archangels are mathematical formulas or the governing intelligences which move this divine energy. So they work with us, and the more we can tap into their archetype, the role that they play in the equation which helps us to discover our true will and to increase our own personal power, the better, the better we can tap into that. So, okay, we'll get into the story of the divine Pymander in the next video, and then we will also be digging into the Emerald Tablets by Billy Carson, the Billy Carson version as well. And it's a little more scientific, so it gets into like physics and all that stuff. It's a little more on the New Agey side. I kind of wanted to, this video probably covers more like the ceremonial aspect, properties of Hermes. But when you combine both in tangent, it's good to have the scientific and logical explanation of things as well as the mystical, because we have our own mythos, our own myth that we live, and we can pull from these different influences, and ultimately at the end of the day we create our own story, but we are inspired by myths from other archetypes and other historical figures. Thoth / Hermes Trismegistus has been a huge influencer over history, so I figured I would go ahead and cover that for this video. But that concludes part 1. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Please give this video a like. Hit the notification bell so you can be notified of new videos. Help spread the word to like-minded people. People who, I know there are people out there who are hungry for this kind of information. They're looking for something deeper in a world that seems very shallow and very, two-dimensional at this point. It seems like there's more and more robots and unconscious souls around us every day, but there are also those of us who are awake and who are seeking a genuine experience, to be able to experience the highest of ourselves, right here in the now, in this part of the cosmos, our beautiful experience. Let's manifest heaven on earth, guys. Peace and love. I've ranted for long enough. Take care. Love you all.